Welcome back, Red Spotters, and literally the Red Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Alexis Soto, joined by David Francisco. And you know what that means? We're back for another segment series, a recap of the latest Disney Plus series, the latest Disney Plus Marvel series, I might add. This is Moonlight, starring Oscar Isaac. Last time we discussed the second episode, Some of the Suit, and today we'll be discussing episode 3, which is called The Friendly Type. And that's today's show on Red Spotlight number 384. And again, for a programming note, I wanted to make a note of a movie called Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I did mention at the top of last week's show. This film is going to be having its own review in episode 385. Myself and Peter Martinez. And I wanted to bring that to your attention because I think... to my estimation, in 7 years, I think in almost 7 or 8 years since we've been doing podcasts, I don't think Peter and I have given a better review than this film. And it is a conversation you'd want to listen to, and on top of all of that, it probably is a film you should go out of your way to see. Believe me, this is something truly special. So I wanted to make a note of that, as well as the fact that our top 10 films of 2021 show will be coming to you at the end of the month. And granted, of course, you all know that seems a bit late for a top 10 show of the previous year, although I want to remind you, we of course are the people that brought you a top 10 show of 2020 in the last days of 2021. So by my estimation, we're a few months ahead of that record. So Kyle's list is all locked in from what I hear. Peter's as good as ready, or will be ready. And mine, I'm not even looking at it anymore, honestly. I think I'm pretty happy with where every film that I've seen from 2021 is at least placed on that list. And so, yeah. So I want to keep all of you up to date with all of that, of course, here on Red Spotlight. Of course, also turn to Page, our latest show with David Francisco, Alexis Moreno, Kyle Lira, and of course Peter Martinez, the Potterheads of our Red Spotlight network. Remind me, David, where are you currently? What was the last episode? What was it you were? I guess what chapter are you on? What book are you on? Where are you at?
We just uploaded the last 4 chapters of the first book, and then we're still thinking about it. But our next episode, by the end of April, it's probably gonna be an audio commentary on the first movie. Either that, or we're just gonna talk about the first movie. We still haven't decided. Right. But
I will bet you $100. Kyle Lira is going to start off bitching about the title of the film because, of course, the title is called The Sorcerer's Stone, the film anyway, in certain regions of the planet, but in other places it is called The Philosopher's Stone. So I guarantee you that's going to come up. So remind me if it does. Because it's just so... oh, he'll love this. It's so predictable, of course, of him to do. And I can say that because he won't listen to this. So there's the benefit of that. That's that's wonderful. Anyway, there is that. Before we head off into the Moon Knight thing, I did want to make a note of something that kind of, fascinates me, and that is with a lot of the recent publications, whether it be Collider or Screen Rant or comicbook.com, I've noticed a little bit of a shift ever since the remainder or several of the key or of the marquee, I should say, Marvel Entertainment series from Netflix and ABC were dropped on Disney Plus. If you're gonna believe it already, David, almost a month ago, like those shows dropped on Disney Plus on March 16th, and we're recording this on April 13th. It's basically already a month or about to be a month. So it's crazy how quickly time just flies. But it feels like there's been kind of a shift since then, because whereas before it seemed very much that a lot of, obviously the fans, online or otherwise, and even the media publications would go along with this, and that is kind of keep all of those Marvel Entertainment shows like separate from the Marvel Studios echelon of things. And then, of course, when they would introduce the element of canon, which is everybody's favorite topic, they would always make it clear to make sure which was which, right? Not that it was all one thing.
Mm-hmm.
The change that I've noticed since those shows were dropped on Disney Plus, that being the 6 Defender series plus Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., altogether 7 shows that were dropped on the same day, March 16th. A lot of these publications I mentioned, Screen Rant, Comic Book, and Collider, have now begun like referring to all of Marvel TV as if it were like in the MCU. Because now I think it was a recent article I shared with you from Collider referred to it as they were ranking the main, not all, but the main MCU shows.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's also now like several people I think have released like lists of ranking all of these different shows. And I believe that at one point you and I did do that, right? I think sometime last year we did do a list of all of these shows combined from our least favorite to favorite.
Yeah, we usually do that after every Marvel show.
Several times last year. So it is fascinating to see how people would rank them when that is the case. And so that's just an interesting observation. And I'm happy, of course, for the shows that they're getting some kind of treatment here that is, I don't know, inclusive. So there is that. Like one of the things recently, last episode we discussed that Screen Rant had a whole story of the top 10 rated episodes of all of Marvel TV according to IMDb user ratings. And we discussed that at length. I don't know if you had anything to make of, what was the writer's name? I think it was Ty Weinert at Collider about 4 days ago published every Disney Plus Marvel show ranked, including the Defenders saga. And the ranking was, I would say, for the most part, pretty good, but then there were some interesting choices that were made. And of course, everyone's entitled to their opinion, of course. I just bring this as, it is Collider. It is a major publication. It's worth noting the person that they commissioned to do this list and see what they thought, right? So at the bottom was Inhumans. Everybody agrees there. Then it was Iron Fist. Then the Defenders. Interestingly enough, then was the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And you know what? Let me just make sure let me see here. So it's ranked. Okay. They include an IMDb score of the overall series. I don't think that's relevant. I don't think that's how they chose to rank these lists, but anyway, there's that. I think it is the person's opinion. So it was Inhumans, then Iron Fist, then the Defenders, and then interestingly enough was the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Then after that was Luke Cage. Then this is the one that really that stands out almost immediately. What If? I don't think What If is something I enjoyed anywhere near as much as Luke Cage, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or even the first 4 episodes of The Defenders.
Mm-hmm.
Like anything, really.
Yeah, I wouldn't even put it on the list.
Oh shit! Well, I mean, okay.
I mean, it's not like it was as bad as Inhumans or anything like that. It's
no, hell no. It wasn't bad. It was just pretty like vanilla.
Yeah.
And there ain't nothing wrong with vanilla every now and then, but I think when you look at the TV shows in particular, it just doesn't come to mind as much. I mean, let's just be real here. I don't want this to come across as if like David and I are like snobs and like we're like dismissing it because it's animation. No, David and I have been champions of the animation medium for years and years now.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, producing superior storytelling than anybody else in the business. So let's just, look at Arcane. Look at what happened with Arcane. Arcane is one of the best stories told in this century. I'm going to just say it right now. I think I even said it to Kyle, who hilariously had no idea what that was. And if that's not all the proof you need, he doesn't listen to our shows. Like, damn, like, how do you not know what this is? Like, Arcane was one of the biggest shows ever to hit streaming. If you look at the Netflix numbers, but like, and I said, Arcane is not, I wouldn't call Arcane one of the best animated shows of all time. I would call Arcane one of the best shows ever made.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Period. Regardless of its medium animation. And it's joke that Arcane didn't win. I don't know if it was the Critics' Choice or if it was the Annie Awards or whatever it was, but they elected to go with What If as the best animated show of 2021. One of those like groups, and I'm like, what?
No.
You had Invincible. You probably already had Rick and Morty. And of course you've got Arcane, which seems like the choice to go with.
Mm-hmm.
And you go with What If? Yeah, no, that doesn't fly. So that's gonna be a no for me. Like, would I put What If on a? Well, I guess I may just have to, because like it is technically speaking in the multiverse of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is a Marvel Studios production. Like, I think it has enough merits to be qualifying on the list, but I don't think I would put it very high. I mean, I just said, yeah, so there's that. Then, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which, I mean, obviously it would come across, not at all surprising to everybody listening that I feel that this is way, way too low. Like, I mean, to me, I've said this so many times, like, I think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is the best show Marvel has done, and I think still to this day ever has done, because of the absolute range of different like storylines you get. I think that, to me, I don't think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is the best show ever made, but I think it's like everything you would want and hope for in a comic book show. Like, I think it really delivers on that stuff, in ways that I don't think anybody would have expected just by watching the first few episodes of the series. So, yeah, it seems it seems very much low, especially when you consider the fact that what comes after it, which they evidently ranked above it, which would be Hawkeye. Which I liked Hawkeye. We talked about it, but I know I sure as hell didn't. I don't think I would put it above maybe even Luke Cage, honestly. At least the first season of Luke Cage. Mm-hmm. I remember that very well. Obviously, I wouldn't put it above the Agents. And then after that, there is Jessica Jones. And that's a different mixed bag, because I've only seen Jessica Jones season 1. And if we're talking about that first season, then it probably should be higher. Mm-hmm. But because of the last 2 seasons, that I haven't seen but everybody else has, this is why probably it's like, I think, toward the middle of the pack. But you ask anybody else, they may even say, well, because those last 2 seasons just were not anywhere near as good as the first one, I think it really just brings down the whole, like, I guess, estimation of this series. So there, of course, is that. The next one they have is WandaVision, which, again, I feel that one should be a lot higher than that. Especially, of course, since they have Loki over WandaVision, which is a big no for me. It's a no for me. Like Randy Jackson on American Idol. It's a no for me. Like, that's not... No. I know that was a dated reference, like, of all the things to reference to, 20 years, literally. But there's that. And then The Punisher is literally ranked like the second highest. Really? Really? The Punisher? The Punisher was, at best, pretty good.
Yeah.
But I don't recall ever being amazed by the show.
Yeah.
To me, it was like, in some ways, Frank Castle suffered from what I think Peter Parker suffered, as far as like MCU storytelling is concerned. Like, I feel like for the longest time, all of Peter Parker's best moments in the MCU were in the Avengers movies. They were not in his own films. And if you ask me about like what I remember about Frank Castle, it's all Daredevil season 2. Like, that stuff's amazing.
And I think that's kind of how his character is in the comics. I've never read a Punisher comic, so I'm probably wrong. But
from what you've heard.
From what I've heard is it's like you usually... Frank Castle isn't necessarily the main character. He's usually stuck with another character. Not like a superhero.
Yeah, he's not a lead, right?
Yeah.
He's a supporting player.
Yeah. And so that's kind of how it is.
Yeah, it's like, but that also is the same story of Morbius, right? Like, Morbius, the vampire Spider-Man villain, was never like, he was never designed to be a standalone character in the comic books, and he never had a solo comic series. Sony was like, what do we have? And let's just spin it off that. And they made a movie called Morbius. And, well, we all know how that turned out to be. And, of course, number 1, Daredevil. It's really hard to argue at all with Daredevil being number 1. I don't know. I think I would go back and forth between that and WandaVision as my personal number 2. The thing is, I love the characters in Daredevil, but I also really love the Wanda and Vision romance. So, but yeah. Anyway, that being said, this really, I just want to say that to me, as a fan of particularly Agents, for years and years and years now, it seems like it's kind of having a little bit of like a moment because, and you'll notice this, we've been talking about this pretty much weekly this last month, ever since it's dropped on Disney Plus a month ago. For whatever reason, there's been some pretty like nice coverage and treatment of the series since it dropped on Disney Plus. We mentioned basically all of those articles on this show throughout the weeks. But the timing is weird because all of these like positive like articles being written about the show, the legacy of the show, getting people to even watch it. There were even articles that were written by, I think it was either the Direct or if it was comicbook.com, but basically like was devoted to outlining for those who are barely getting into the show how to watch the entirety of the 136 episodes within the continuity of the films, which is pretty fucking daunting. Anybody who says, okay, I'm going to watch everything the MCU has done. Okay, good luck. That's a lot of, you're talking about like 20, almost 30 movies, the Disney Plus series, the Marvel Entertainment stuff, which is almost at 300 episodes. The Marvel one-shots, it's insane. So, yeah, but all of that happens to coincide with a couple of hilarious things. Like, to me, again, I have to stress this because nobody else wants to stress this. Before the fact, and I would still say to a large extent within certain media personalities, particularly the ones that inhabit the YouTube space that have a large audience, right? It's a show that is downright ignored if it ever comes up in conversation. It's kind of just, it's there too. But now let's get back to the main event. Again, I can't be the only person that noticed that in these last 4 weeks, 2 major things have happened that no one seems to want to acknowledge. First of which, the IMDb thing that Screen Rant ran with showed that of every single episode of television Marvel Studios or Marvel Entertainment has ever produced. It just so happens to be an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. episode that has the highest rating? What? That doesn't track with a lot of the, shall we say, I don't even want to call it shade, just the comments that were used to slam the show. So there is that. Also, you have to couple that with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., 4 weeks after it dropped on Disney Plus, is the only one that still shows up on the trending tab. Of the 7 shows that dropped on March 16th, it is the only one still trending. So, as a fan of the show, it feels pretty good to have all of this stuff coincide. And of course, you also throw in the other aspects of it, right? With the whole, what's his name? Reed Diamond talking about like Daniel Whitehall almost being in the movies. So, it's just nice to see, in my own little way, the stuff that I do like about the MCU, especially this. Like, I don't think I know. There's nothing in the MCU I love more than this show, which is Agents. So it's nice to see, I don't know, what's that word? Recognition, there it is. Some recognition in its own little ways, because, yeah. So, there is that. Anywho, with all of that being said, I think we should get into Moon Knight for the week. I don't know what is happening here, because some people out there, said media personalities, or one in particular that I'm thinking of, has somehow gotten the impression that Moon Knight is not doing too well. At least from a, I don't know, from a viewership standpoint, which, by the way, is impossible to measure right now. The Nielsen numbers don't come out and won't come out until, like, at best, 2 weeks from now, about how the premiere did. So, Nielsen is the best right now at, like, providing weekly stats for how programming does on streaming. But because it's still so new, it takes them like 3 to 4 weeks to, like, tell us how. Well, they're 3 to 4 weeks behind. That's how long it takes them to, like, figure out, do the math, as they say, for how many minutes something was watched. So I don't know, like, to me, I'm not going to say that I agree with that. Because I think I've seen the tab. Moon Knight is like the number one thing that people watch on Disney Plus. If you go on Disney Plus right now, it's either people are either watching Moon Knight or Turning Red. So it's doing very well. I think we have acknowledged that for some fans of the comic, or some fans of certain elements of the comics, are not happy. They were not at all happy with what transpired in last week's installment, that's for sure. But that's always going to happen with any show. There'll always be fans of the comics that are not happy with the adaptation, as you say. I don't know. To me, obviously, I don't think any of the Disney Plus shows in the Marvel realm, have really come close to touching the moment that was WandaVision. Maybe Loki. I think for a couple of weeks, Loki got there in terms of like the excitement and the discussion that it was generating. But ultimately, these other shows have not generated that kind of discussion. That is to be fair. But I don't think that means that the shows themselves have been like unsuccessful just because of that. So that's another aspect of it. I have sensed, though, that, I don't know, 3 weeks in, I'm not seeing much love for the series from particularly the MCU stans, as I like to call them, at least on Twitter. I would still say I'm seeing still, literally still, more love for Spider-Man No Way Home than I am for Moon Knight. And I get it. Look, it's hard to compete with No Way Home, which is like one of the most successful films that was ever made from a box office standpoint. $1.8 billion. It is pretty hard to compete with that kind of traffic, sure. But I don't know. And to me, I don't know. I guess to some people it feels a little bit low-key. No pun intended, obviously. We're talking about Marvel, but it feels a bit low-key in terms of like the material that's going on in Moon Knight. I don't know what's really driving it. But I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I'm watching every episode wanting it to be good and wanting to enjoy it. That said, I think okay, let's talk about the episode where we are now. I think 3 episodes in, one of my biggest issues, I think several of my issues remain what they were before I even saw a single episode of this. And watching 3 episodes now, it just reinforces what I said. I don't like the 6-episode thing. I don't like it at all because it makes all of these shows, with like maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, feel like it's one long movie. And I don't want long movies. I want long form storytelling. I want shows. There is a difference. Because when you do miniseries that basically were filmed as if they were a film and you chop them up into 6 parts, it feels like we end in random moments and then begin in random moments. So, also, I like opening title sequences. You know, I appreciate so much that Peacemaker had that. Now, I don't want to be confused. I don't want to confuse people. I'm not asking them to do a musical opening sequence like Peacemaker did. Mm-hmm. Just like something instead of like opening with the Marvel logo.
Yeah, no, I mean, I still think Daredevil had the best opening of all the Marvel shows.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the theme is just so good, and then just the way the visuals of it's just really entertaining to watch. I can never skip over them, basically.
I never did, I think. Mm-hmm. I don't think. Yeah. So I don't know why you couldn't just do that. Like, Hawkeye had opening credits for like 1 episode.
Mm-hmm. And it was pretty cool. I liked it.
They were good. I would have enjoyed to have seen them every single episode. Yeah. So that's something that's obviously there. With that being said, I lost my train of thought.
You were just going about your complaints about the show.
Well, yeah, that, I know that, but I'm trying. There was something, and then the more my mind was trying to reach for it, the more it just slipped.
Well, my complaint, I guess you can say mostly about this episode. Some of the fighting scenes didn't work so well with me. You just can tell that it looks very coordinated. Like I could tell, it just looks like you can. It looks as if they just went, okay, now do this punching scene, action, cut, cool, next one. And I'm like, I feel like you could have done it in a better way. At least cut it in a different way. There's so many cuts, especially in the first fight scene, that just kind of look confusing.
I remember what it was. With Moon Knight, though, the fact that it is basically a long movie. I think this is the show where it hasn't, brought it down so much as the others. I feel like it's, we're 3 episodes, and everything that I'm seeing, I feel, for the most part, engaged.
Yeah.
And that we're with the story, so, I mean, it's moving, and I appreciate that. So there is, I guess, one note of positivity there as far as, like, the 6-episode thing. Mm-hmm. To what you were saying. Yeah, I would say overall the choreography of the action sequences did leave much to be desired. I mean, all over the place, I would say, not just like with one or the other. I think particularly there were a lot of issues from the get-go, from that first action sequence with the, I don't know, you want to call them thugs on the rooftop. You're right. Editing overall from the show has been pretty great. In this instance, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It really kind of you have to wonder, it's like, was there some kind of like compensation for something that was lacking overall, if not for doing those crazy jump cuts?
Yeah, I mean, is this Oscar Isaac's first like action role?
Did it seem like it was?
I don't know. I feel like it might. I feel like I heard like this is kind of like his first time. Don't quote me on it.
We'll begin the episode and he was like jumping around, kind of like leapfrogging. I'm not too sure, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, if it is like, you know, usually I can give a little bit of leeway, but but I mean, since this is an MCU show, though, like I feel like they could have gave him the right amount of training.
You know how they've been lately, man.
I know.
That's just kind of what it is. I mean, overall, generally speaking, and this kind of goes into the other issue. Well, I mean, let me just stay on the fighting. There was the other sequence with the other location that was at night, and there were horses, and they were impaling each other. I guess he killed those people?
Yeah.
But if you noticed, first of all, of course, there's no blood, but that's fine, whatever. But, I don't know, I guess the implication was that those people were killed because, I don't know, it didn't seem like he was, like, the blows that he was striking were death blows. Until, like, you realize they never get back up again. Like, there was this one quick shot of, like, I think he used one of his, like, weapons, and in the camera, like, on the angle of the camera, you see it slit one of the guards' throats, but then it cuts something else. There's no blood. It's just like, oh, you never see him again. So it's like...
And this is supposed to be their most violent...
Yeah, like... This is the most violent you're willing to get?
Yeah.
Like, I'm still not seeing that. That critique I had last week and the week before just gets worse this week because, man, like, there was no need to, like... First of all, and again, I want to be clear. It's not as if, like, we're calling for, like, Disney to open the floodgates.
Yeah, we're not...
like,
I'm not expecting Daredevil level of violence or anything like that, but I just remembered, like, wait, you guys said this is the most violent Marvel thing you've made, and I didn't even think that these guys were dead. I thought they were just badly maimed.
There was one guy that gets, like, impaled.
Yeah.
That
the end of the fight, you know, a lot of them get impaled and all that, and which is, I mean,
but you don't see it. Of course,
you don't see it. You don't see blood or anything. Or, you don't even see blood on him, and he's wearing all white. Like you should, Like there should be stains at least.
And I'm sorry, but Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was more violent than this.
Oh my gosh, that Dove Cameron.
Dove Cameron. Did you in that same episode? Remember what she did to her boyfriend?
Yeah,
that Strucker kid. Remember the crushed the crush of the squeezed like head like hemorrhaging within itself. There were several Hydra agents that got like bullets in their heads. There were slit throats. Like there was one recently with what was it? Oh yeah, like I'm sorry, but like there was a lot of like pretty violent. Oh, Yo-Yo, her arms.
Oh yeah. I would expect at least that kind of level of violence on Moonlight. At least I think.
Yeah,
that's
because
what
like there obviously was a difference between like the level of like graphic imagery and violence between Daredevil and like Agents. Because Daredevil on Netflix, it was I think TVMA. Agents was TV-14, as it was a broadcast network show. yeah, like if you're not even like meeting Agents of Shield level, like what are you doing?
Yeah. And especially
like, and
because
I appreciate Steven like on the inside of the vessel trying to like get marked and not kill people. But I would understand that more if I'd actually see him kill people. I don't think I've seen him kill anybody.
I mean, it's just that one scene in the first episode. We already know he has blood on his hands. Like, that's really the only...
But we still don't even see anything.
We don't even
like,
see
it's just the aftermath.
This is one review I heard. Like, the best fight scenes are the ones that we don't see. Like... like, so, like, in our minds, we're thinking, like, oh my gosh, she'd be like, like, in my mind, I'm not kidding you. Like, when we skip the fight scenes, I'm like imagining that he like pulverized these dudes or something, but then when we get to an actual fight scene and it's just like that,
you know what? I'm just remembering, Yo-Yo didn't. Not only did she get her arms cut off, but future Yo-Yo got her throat slit in front of Mac by Cassius. If you remember that one, like there was a lot. It's like holy shit. Yeah, so I don't understand it. And again, I said this weeks ago. The fact that Agents and the other Defender shows are now on the same service and the same section as Moon Knight, it's not a good look. When you're like, you can deliver this, but when you go off, it's just a couple of clicks away, and then you see it's like, oh, what's happening? Why? And that's like, again, you notice it because evidently the implication was that these people were dead, but the fighting sequences is not telegraphing that whatsoever. Mm-hmm. On top of it not being that interesting that interesting. Like I'll be honest with you, I was really kind of underwhelmed with how, and a little bit confused with how Mark used the suit in this episode, because the part that confused me was when the guys kind of got a little bit of an upper hand when they began impaling him, and I'm like, but wait, I thought this suit was supposed to protect against. So like, I'm not entirely sure like on the rules of it. I guess like he's not indestructible then.
I think. Yeah, no, I don't think he's not even bulletproof or anything like that. It's just the suit gives him healing properties, I guess. So I'm guessing he can still feel pain and all that, and stuff can go through him. It's just by the end of it, he'll be fully healed, I guess. Yeah,
I guess I was operating with the assumption that it was kind of like Ghost Rider.
Yeah,
and Shield, when you saw Ghost Rider, he was kind of unstoppable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, in a way like that. I don't know. Have you ever seen what was it, Wolverine? You know, the one.
Which Wolverine?
The one where I think he's like in Japan or something.
Oh, like the Wolverine.
Yeah, the Wolverine.
The movie, yeah.
You know how like he got impaled by a bunch of arrows, and like I think it might have had poison in it, but like either way though, like he gets impaled a lot, and by the end he gets struck down. That's basically how I'm seeing Moon Knight with the suit on. Yeah, like by the end of it, you know, as soon as he gets those sticks out of him, he'll be fully healed.
Yeah, I guess like with Wolverine, it made sense because that was like that was his blood, right? Like that's kind of with him being a mutant, like it, right? Isn't that the adamantium that he had in his blood? That's why Wolverine could heal, right?
He just had healing abilities.
Right, he had healing abilities, sure. With Moon Knight, like I guess like with the X-Men. That makes more sense because there's genetics, and I guess that's kind of like there's different powers, and when you have like a group of different powered people, like there's more explanation. Moon Knight is, again, it's still kind of weird because I guess like Moon Knight is an avatar for a god.
Yeah.
So you'd think that would suggest more or less he'd be kind of unstoppable. But okay. That's why I'm a little bit like not 100% clear with the abilities of the suit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where I overall was for me there. Speaking of the other thing that I was going to mention, which you see also very much prevalent I would say especially in the opening sequences of the episode that include the rooftop and a lot of the day sequences there. Listen, I know there's been a lot of criticism toward the show in regards to its quote-unquote wonky VFX. And let me just look back at the previous 2 episodes. Yeah, we talked about the van sequence rolling down the hill, and it looked the way it looked. Granted, obviously. I've also said at the same time, the Jackal looked perfectly good for it being a TV show. Maybe even a little bit better. Like, it was fine. It was TV. I accepted that. Like, I have different standards for a TV show budget than I do for a film budget, first and foremost. That's, I think, perfectly understandable. And I honestly have not thought twice until people have been pointing it out about how Khonshu himself looks like. But there are apparently people out there that don't like that. That evidently feels like he doesn't like blend in with the overall aesthetic of the series. Maybe a little bit, but I don't think it's bothered me any at all.
No, I mean I like Khonshu's design actually. I think it's because it doesn't blend in with the aesthetic. I don't know.
That it sticks out.
Yeah, it sticks out and all that. My thing,
in a good way, I should say.
In a good way. Yeah. My thing is that I don't like that he's fully CGI. I feel like you could have like made a costume out of it and just have like the person be
That's
green
true,
screen.
huh? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't like that he's fully CG.
Yeah. Then again, look who we're dealing with. Like, even when it comes to TV, they can't help themselves from doing it. I feel like Moon Knight's gotten a lot more criticism from Marvel fans for its VFX than something that, quite frankly, should be really like ripped apart, which is Spider-Man: No Way Home or Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Like, hello. I guess not all things are created equally. I guess like they were willing to overlook that and go to war on Twitter with people who were criticizing the look of the cinematography and the visual effects, because how dare you critique a thing that I love? But if just one little thing is not right with something else that I know I don't love, by all means, I will go ahead and open the floodgates there. Come on. Like, these people, yeah, there's no consistency there, but like, come on. We're not at that level for the most part. However, getting back to that opening sequence on the rooftop, wow. Man, I am really getting sick and tired of Marvel Studios. What is Marvel Studios? Like, are they just like, oh, they just like what got one room with a bunch of blue walls and that's all they ever have to do? And then like lights on the ceiling? Because literally that's all that Egypt was, especially in that rooftop. Like, honestly, that has to be one of the most distracting executions of their blue screen in a while. Because when you look at Oscar Isaac leapfrogging or like, you know, leaping across the rooftops and then he lands and then the fight starts with those three guys, something immediately looks wrong. Like, it's supposed to be day, but the lighting is very, very weird. It's not natural lighting, that's for sure. And that's the dead giveaway. This wasn't shot outside. This was shot entirely indoors, and all of the environment is their legendary blue wall. Now, I don't know if you caught this, but if you go back and look at it again, it is very prevalent throughout that entire sequence. And let me tell you, like, that just, like, to me, it sinks the whole thing. And again, with TV, I am more forgiving when it comes to this stuff. But even then, Marvel does this across the board, and that I can't excuse all of the time, if at all anymore. And on top of that, it wasn't a very good execution either. Like, it just looked kind of fake the entire time we were out in the daylight.
I mean, I mostly noticed it by the end of the sequence, like at the end when he was at that cliff.
Yeah. That was bad.
Yeah, with him, you see the sky and everything, but I'm like, oh my gosh, he's not even blending in that well with the sky. And Khonshu next to him, it just makes it kind of worse. So, yeah.
It's like, how is this acceptable?
Mm-hmm.
And we've gotten to the point now where they're consistently turning in this kind of quality of VFX shots. Between this and No Way Home and Shang-Chi and Black Widow, it's like, oh my goodness. Oh no. This is bad. And why are people okay with this? Like, you people who are out there like bitching about like this instance in Moonlight, sure. But where were you with all the other examples?
Mm-hmm. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. have better VFX.
Yeah, since we're talking, great, thank you. Since we're talking about it, yeah, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had better, like, they had this is where it also, here's the classic grinds my gears thing. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had so much less resources to work with across the board. So much less resources. And yet, and by the way, that isn't to say they themselves sometimes were not prone to effects that weren't great. There were several of them. But I would wager to say that a good 90% of the time, when they did a VFX shot, was pretty fucking convincing.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely better than what I expected from a TV show. To me, like
on network television, not a streaming show that was produced for network TV.
Yeah.
Because when you think of network TV, with all due respect, you think of the CW.
Yes, I was gonna say that. It's like the CW is probably some of the worst CGI that I've seen. But even then, though, it doesn't. It still doesn't take me out of the show where I'm like, oh, that looks horrible. I'm just kind of like, all right. I mean, it's a TV show, and so.
Well, for the most part, from what I've seen of the CW shows, right, and what network shows would be is the sets that they use are actual sets.
Yeah.
Now that helps, and that goes a long way. And like with the Flash, for example, a lot of the effects are used with like when he's, using his speedster abilities, or let's say villains like Gorilla Grodd or others that are mostly VFX. Those are the easy ones to tell and like, okay, but we're willing to go with it because of the fun that we're having here, right? And again, like the novelty of those shows I think for the longest time now has kind of worn off, but when they were like in their infancy in the early 2010s, like people loved them. They were willing to overlook that stuff because most of what you saw was real in those shows because it kind of had to be there. With Marvel, they don't even get to that approach for the longest time. It's like, what are sets? That's why I was talking with Peter last night while we were recording our review, and Multiverse of Madness came up, and it's hilarious how like the whole world is like excited about this film for, its cameos or like its overall impact to the MCU. Meanwhile, we're having our own little corner over here and we're like excited about the film because it looks like they actually used sets. It's like they hired extras and they brought color back into the cinematography, and a director in the form of Sam Raimi is actually like holding the camera interestingly. And these are like that's the bare minimum of what anybody's expectations should be for anything in this genre, especially of storytelling. And yet Marvel consistently does not meet those expectations. And it saddens me that we've basically taken up a huge chunk of an otherwise good episode and an otherwise good show talking about how bad it looked here, because it did. It very much did. Like, this is not, again, talking about how the show in one instance was marketing itself as the most violent MCU show thus far. Nowhere does it come close to that. But aside from it, again, the whole promise of this being a Disney Plus show, a premiere show on a streaming service, the whole point of it was, or not the point, but the whole advantage to being a show in this genre on this big streaming service was the fact that it was supposed to have the big bucks. You know, it was supposed to have the money to make sure what we saw in this past episode did not happen. And I'm sorry that we went on a rant about this, and we're still in our observation of the overall episode, but it's a point that needs to be made. Because when something looks bad, it's got to be called out. I'm done, like, letting this shit slide. I'm just done. So, yeah. It was bad. Anywho, with all of that being said, were there any other negatives for the episode before we get into some of the positives?
No, not really. It's really just the fighting scenes and the CG.
Okay, now let's go ahead into what we enjoyed about this episode. A lot of intrigue. A lot of intrigue about this this other void, this realm where these gods inhabit, what these gods actually are, the fact that I guess gods now exist in the MCU. Look at everything exists in the MCU. It's also hilarious how when you think about the MCU, it's really hard to keep it all together because there are so many like different like groups of disparate forces that, had they not gotten it exactly right in one of their missions, the whole thing could have blown up. Like it's like seriously, like right now we're on this level of Moon Knight. We've got this cult basically on, you know, hell bent on rising, on lifting Amit from the dead and everything, and that could be the end of everything. And it's hilarious how many like groups, like we saw Eternals, and if they didn't stop Tiamat from being born, that would have been the end of everything. You also got our little team on S.H.I.E.L.D. for several times, either with what was it, the time loop that they were caught in, or with the Chronicoms potentially taking over the planet. From the Avengers, of course, several times. It's like, it's hilarious how, like, just like the many different kinds of and I guess also we're about to see with witches and wizards with in the Multiverse of Madness, how all of it could all just come crumbling down. So, I would say though, it's pretty cool that we have now a cinematic universe where all of that can kind of coexist. You got the science element, you got the magic element, you had basically demigods, and now we're basically in the realm with actual gods in the form of not just here on Moon Knight, but you also got the Eternals and then their Celestials being brought in here. And then you also have like forces like the TVA out there, like they keep the, you know, time in check, and it's like, it's so massive, it's so dense, as people like to say, that when you begin to think about like how this universe actually functions, it's like, man, how do these forces like at some point don't like come into conflict with each other, you know? Like, you think these gods, these Egyptian gods, would have at some point, I don't know, had a bone to pick with the Eternals and their mission to like harvest the planet and like for it all to have been destroyed? Maybe that would have, or the TVA for that matter. Unless, of course, you know, the TVA knows everything and they knew that the Eternals would have eventually have stopped it. So, of course, it's funny to think about all of that. That being said, it really opened up, I guess, this realm that Moon Knight operates with these Egyptian gods, and it was fascinating to see. Not just that they exist or how they operate, but like also their relationships to each other. So that I thought was pretty interesting. Khonshu himself, really interesting. A lot more so than we know a lot more of him now, it seemed like, than we did in the previous two episodes. And it kind of changes my perspective of him a little bit.
Yeah.
Than what I had, like, you know, initially given him credit for. I really enjoy Layla in this episode. And I'm curious to see hopeful also that she continues to get an expanded role as we go into the weeks. She comes across genuinely as somebody that is very much into, artifacts and archaeology. We get some backstory with her, and that her father was an archaeologist that evidently died recently, and that's kind of been a big thing for her. But I'm curious to see where this goes. But I love the interplay between her and Oscar Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of Oscar Isaac, he continues to be great. I'll be honest though, I'm a little bit torn because it's really hard to like Mark. I don't know how much of like him as I'm not saying that I'm altogether disinterested in him.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's hard to, I don't know, like him anywhere near as much as I do Steven.
Mm-hmm.
And Steven's still here, and I'm happy he didn't completely fall off the face of the earth when it came to this series, and he comes back into play here. But I'm curious to, again, we're still learning about Mark, so there is all of that being, said and everything.
Yeah.
And Ethan Hawke continues to impress as a villain. He is really eating it up. He really did. In several of these scenes. So very, very good. Good job with Ethan Hawke. And I liked the light show that we got at the end of the episode. With the moon, wasn't it?
That was really nice.
Yeah. All in all, I really enjoyed the episode. And again, I'm still engaged with this story. And I'm very curious to see how or what they do now or next, considering that something significant has kind of been taken away from them.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that. Anything else to say about this episode before we get into the events?
I basically agree with you. Like I said last week, I really like that we're moving the plot along pretty fast now. With this show, way more faster than the other shows, and they keep making it better in this episode. Khonshu, he was the biggest surprise for me in this episode. I really like what they did with him, I just really like they expanded the world, and they expanded on the relationship between Mark and Layla.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's go ahead and recap the episode as it happened in sequence. So we start off this week. Mark is leaping across the buildings, and he was looking for somebody that ends up getting knifed literally in the chest or in the stomach. I don't know. The guy's dead. These three thugs. And then they get into it. And then something interesting happens. For the first time, we see Steven being able to relinquish control of the body away from Mark.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting. And so we get one of those cuts of lost time. We leave the rooftop, and then it ends up being that Steven had taken the body to basically leave and get the fuck out of here because, again, Steven still to an extent is not really aware of all of what's happening here or really all of what's at stake. And so his primary, prerogative, if you'd say, is to make sure that the person that inhabits his body does little murder as possible. So I understand from that aspect why he'd want to leave this particular place. And again, the guy's still not all entirely sure about what's really happening. He just wants to not hurt people. That's basically the goal. And then he loses control of Mark, and then Mark realizes about where it all changed, and then comically enough, the cab stops right as the thugs are just walking out the front door of some building, and then Mark gets out and starts chasing them down. Catches one of them, but then one of the other guys comes by and gets the upper hand. He kind of gets knocked out. And then as he gets knocked out, something mysterious happens. Because we're left with the impression that as soon as Mark hits the ground, to the point where we see him wake up, 2 of the guys have just been killed. 2 of the 3 guys have been killed. And Mark's entirely confused. And we're confused because, like, Steven didn't do this. Yeah. And so he asks Steven, what did you do? And Steven was like, I don't know what happened here. And at this point, it's like, see, when I first saw this, my mind was like, well, Khonshu. Khonshu also has, right, the ability to, like, but I guess not. Because if I'm, like, looking back at, like, now that I'm thinking back to the previous 2 episodes, at no point did, like, Khonshu just, like, because, like, if you think about it, like, long enough, if Khonshu could just take a body and inhabit it, like, himself, why would he need Mark around or Steven around? And, you know, to get in the way of his plans and everything. So that doesn't track at all. So that leaves one other option on the board here. And that's kind of scary because what it's suggesting or what it's implying, we've not heard from at all. And it seems like we may have somebody else listening in the wall in Oscar Isaac's head besides Mr. Spector and Mr. Grant. Anyway, David, that's how we begin the episode. Pretty intriguing so far as we start off. What are your thoughts?
I know we complain about the action scene and all that, but I really did like those moments though where he just happens to find himself on a reflection. That was one of the action scenes where he has like a knife, but like it's big enough that you can see his own reflection, and that's how he communicates with Steven and all that. That was one of the cool things. It's just to keep finding themselves in reflections and all that. I also did like that Steven is able to gain control whenever he wants. Usually in just moments where his ethics is gets being tested in a way. And then I really like the little hint of the third personality possibly taking over.
I mean, have you read or given any thought about as to who that persona could be?
I know there is a third personality in the comics. I can't remember the name though. I think his name was Jake or something. But
yeah, it's Jake something. Mm-hmm. I don't know what that personality looks like or what it is, but like, that's crazy.
Yeah,
if we're dealing with that.
Yeah, I didn't expect we were gonna deal with that.
No, I was entirely convinced it's Mark and it's Steve, and that's where it is. Mm-hmm. But somebody else? Ooh. That is interesting. That is very interesting. And so, at that moment, Mark regains control, and then you got one more of these cultists that is left alive. Khonshu directs Mark to take the kid he's not a kid, but he's a young man. He takes him over to the side of the cliff and basically to threaten him with dropping him over the cliff to reveal the location of the dig site that Arthur Harrow? I think it's Harrow, right? Arthur Harrow, Ethan Hawke's character, has begun to find the Amit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Amit's
2.
And so that happens, but then the guy just like refuses to give up the location, and basically like with his own knife cuts the wire, as they say, mm-hmm. and then he fucking dies as he falls off the cliff. And at that point, like, I'm sorry, but that's not murder, that's suicide. Mm-hmm. Like, that's basically volunteering to kill yourself. And honestly, look, and this is something, I'm not here to question people of faith. I'm here to it's just like, it's one of these things as a viewer that just so frustrates me that people in this life, in our world, can be so manipulated and so taken over by malicious entities like, this cult of Amit that convinces them that it's okay, that sacrifice is okay, and that sacrificing your own life is worth it for this God to come back, as if that's going to bring you anything meaningful. Again, but just to be clear, this isn't a critique of the show. It's just my commentary on cults and people who like subscribe to them, and just like the sympathy. Really, my sympathy really is like tested when it comes to people like this, because like, man, you literally just chose to die for a pretty stupid cause. Again, a cult that is basically going to murder many people on the planet. And the thought that that brought you joy? The hell am I going to feel bad about you dying? Sorry. Not sorry. And Steven, don't feel bad about that guy dying. Nobody cared. I don't care. I'm sorry.
I also like
It's the truth.
I like Khonshu's comments on it. It's like, I really thought he was going to confess.
I remember that.
Yeah.
He was like, I love how like he was like sitting on the cliff and just like nonchalantly just like commenting on it, like, huh, I thought he was yeah, just like not caring at all about it, but just like, oh man, I guess I got that one wrong. That was pretty funny. You're right. Well, after that happens, they're basically at a loss as to what to do, and Khonshu gets desperate, as Arthur will say, because Arthur is able to, as Arthur being the former avatar of Khonshu, kind of like know what's happening when he sees a random eclipse of the sun. And the bad idea that Khonshu formulated was to basically like, the only way to guarantee the attention of the other gods was to do something to the sky, which they hate, and they hate him. He wanted to convene all of them together in this tomb. Giza? I think the Pyramid of Giza, is that what it was?
Yeah, one of the pyramids.
Yeah, and we know that because as we see Mark Spector walk into the actual place through these portals, or these gates, shall we say, the reflection we see, I love watching Steven geek out about like, oh my God, we're in the Pyramid of Giza. I cannot believe this. So I love again that we're keeping Steven in the loop in some way somehow. But anyway, the whole point to get these gods in the same place together. Again, that seeing them and seeing how this works in and of itself was very interesting and very engaging. But the whole point was to basically get around Khonshu having to capture Arthur and to just have the gods deal with him with a trial. And I guess Khonshu had to have known this was a likelihood, but he still gave it a shot anyway, because Khonshu doesn't strike me as the stupid type. I think this definitely comes across as desperate, as Arthur said in this moment, as the sun was eclipsing, or he was eclipsing the sun, Khonshu was. Because these gods are useless. I mean, if people thought the Eternals were fucking useless, I don't mean the movie. I'm talking about like the beings themselves, as like just like being there to watch humanity grow and not intervene, which they do inevitably, as we saw in their film. These gods not only are pretty fucking useless, it seems they're pretty fucking stupid. Because what happens? I don't want to get like ahead of myself here, but like basically Khonshu's put on trial. Khonshu's asked why they're doing this. Khonshu tells them that Arthur is going to resurrect Amit. The gods are like, that is a very serious accusation. So they bring forth Arthur and they ask him, is this true? And then he says no. And then the gods allow themselves, or allow Arthur, to completely flip the trial into a trial on Khonshu.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was this is not what anybody was gathered for. And it already says so much, just that the gods were so like dismissive of Khonshu that they don't like him at all. Again, it is established that Khonshu was banished by them. So clearly there's bad blood between them. And in the actual exchange between Khonshu and the gods, Khonshu does criticize all of them. Not really, he yells at them, like calling them bastards. Not really, but like basically calling them bastards for abandoning humanity. And that, like, it's, I guess in this, according to Khonshu, he's the only god left that gives a fuck about humans and tries in his own way to help them, whereas the rest of them do not give a rat's ass. And it's an interesting notion where one of the other gods responds to Khonshu saying with like, we did not abandon humanity, humanity forgot about us, which is really interesting. So I'm curious to see if they touch more on that. But the whole thing is, I mean, I don't want to call it a kangaroo court, because a kangaroo court implies that there was like someone behind the scenes that was like, it was a premeditated effort to like cook the books. And that's not what happened here. The gods are genuinely so stupid. They allowed some like former avatar to walk in who is accused of like serious things, and they just believe him straight up. Like, that's the equivalent of years and years ago here in our own world on the national stage, where you had the then president Donald Trump next to Vladimir Putin, the now war criminal Vladimir Putin, prime minister of Russia, at that time accused of committing an act of cyber terrorism to hack the election of 2016. He was asked, both of them at a joint press conference, they were asked by the American press, the American president, about if he had brought up something that has been proven by the entirety of the intelligence community, when they were all saying that yes, Putin did do this. Trump was like, I asked him, he says he didn't do it. There's no reason for me to not believe him. That's the same thing. Like, the gods don't even go out of their way to like collect any kind of evidence or data. They just like, they took somebody at their word. Like, these particular gods are about as useful as corporate Democrats here, which is like, oh, well, yeah, well, we won't do anything. Okay. Anyway, let's get back to our whatever we were doing. No, it's just like, what? Like, didn't that strike you as weird?
I gotta be honest, I kind of tuned out this scene.
Okay.
It wasn't like it was bad or anything. I don't know what it was. I mean, I liked the scene and all, because this is a part where it really expanded the world of this certain mythology and I guess comic book character, because I really did not expect to see the other avatars.
I'm sorry, David, I hate to interrupt you real quick, but like that thing I mentioned with Putin and Trump, that's where that meme came from of Captain America, from that scene of him giving the speech from the Winter Soldier, and him saying, I spoke to Thanos, he said he didn't do it. That's where that meme comes from, and that's exactly what happened here in this fucking trial, quote-unquote trial. And then they just walk away. Yeah, go ahead. So you really tuned this shit out, and you were like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I understood what was happening and all. Like, I got the part where the villain flips the whole trial around on Khonshu and everything. But like I said, I really didn't expect to see like the other avatars of the other gods. I thought that was really interesting. But I also really did like the fact that Khonshu was like willing to try anything to try and stop him, and like, you know, you see him that he's a bit of an asshole towards Mark and all that, but it's like, oh wait, no, he actually cares about humanity. He actually cares about what might happen if Amud is free and all that. But it's just most of the trial though. Like I was legit going to ask you, like, how did the villain flip it on Khonshu exactly? Because like I remember he was trying to like plead his case, you know, because like, oh, he's here because to free Amud and all that, and then I don't know what happened. I just tuned it out, and and then I realized that like he flipped the whole trial, and then it didn't work. But I mean, either way, like I agree with you. Like, yeah, the gods are pretty useless. I kind of wish they explain more on the fact that humanity abandoned them.
Yeah,
it's an interesting thing to bring about.
I mean, I have to imagine at some point that is gonna. Well, who knows?
Yeah,
I would hope at some point that does get discussed as we know more. Well, whenever we do see Khonshu again. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you tune out at a particular moment, you're going to be like really lost at this scene. It's like, wait a minute, I thought the villain was on trial. Why the hell is Khonshu on trial now? Where did all this happen? And it's like, again, like, it's weird. I've never seen that happen before where like the accused just like flips the trial on the accuser, like in real time, and like the jury or the judge just like lets that happen. Mm-hmm. It's like, what? Like, there were serious crimes, and that just got dropped because Arthur was able to discredit Khonshu as a credible individual that should be listened to, because he said that he was a survivor of Khonshu's abuse, as he was his former avatar, but then that Khonshu himself has like stooped so low that now he inhabits a damaged individual, Mark Spector, who is unwell. At that point, the gods then speak to Mark Spector directly and ask him straight up if he is well, quote unquote. Or actually, if he is unwell. Mm-hmm. And then to which Spector replies, yes, I need help. Now, again, this seems to be yet another indication that, and I want to make sure I have this correct here, David, but now it still could go the other way, but I feel like the more we get with the more time that we spend with Mark Spector, a lot of the questions that we have, I feel, are beginning to get cleared up a little bit, whereas in this instance, it seems to suggest that Mark has admitted that he needs help and that he is unwell, and it very much seems to be the closest admission that he's given that he has dissociative identity disorder. Yeah. Again, there's more information is given to us in a upcoming conversation in this episode, but in this moment, it seems to be the best confirmation we got so far.
Yeah, it was actually surprising that I got it. That we heard it from Mark. Like,
do you think he'd be in denial or something?
Yeah, right? I feel like he would have been in denial, or he would have been like, or at least like just the line, "I need help." That's the part that kind of surprised me, because I would have thought he would have at least told them, I got it under control. Like, yeah, in denial of the fact that he needed help, but that's like, no, he actually admitted he needs help. He probably doesn't know how to control this. Maybe he just doesn't know what exactly is going on with him.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was actually really surprising.
And it was hilarious since this trial got turned around on Khonshu, and that's the testimony the gods heard, their decision is to do nothing. This guy just said he needs help. And the gods are like, okay, cool. Bye. What is the point of you people?
Mm-hmm.
What? Okay. Whatever. Wow. Anyway, that happens. But, Khonshu is given a warning that if he messes with the sky again, he will be imprisoned in stone. And that apparently was no joke. Before Mark leaves, he is approached by the avatar of another god that used to be close with Khonshu, and the avatar points Mark in the direction of a sarcophagus he can find of the individual who recorded the exact location of Amit's tomb.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the clue that he's given with. At this point, we then go ahead and cut to Mark in his stereotypical MCU conspicuous look with a baseball cap on and a jacket. No sunglasses, but just a baseball cap. In the streets of Cairo, and then it seems out of random, he talks to somebody about where he can find the sarcophagus, and then, wouldn't you know it, Layla comes back in the picture. And at just this moment, I now realize I made a boo-boo. This episode didn't begin with Mark. It began actually with Layla and her mom, and her making a passport for Layla to get to Egypt. And let me just tell you, this had nothing at all to do with like the actual story or the narrative going on in this show, but it really kind of like fascinated me.
Yeah.
How they were able to like so expertly like craft those passports. I'm like, where can I get one? Like seriously, like they were really well made.
Yeah. Almost
to the point where it's like, if you're like, I don't know, customs, and you're watching that episode, you're like, fuck, now we got to deal with people like being inspired by this. Like, shit, we got to step up our game. Because like, that was real good. So just like from a, I don't know, production design standpoint, that was cool. And it also gives us some backend information about Layla. She's, dead set on following Mark. She's got her own plans. We find out that on top, I guess, more about who she really or who she is, and that is somebody not only that appreciates like old artifacts, but she enjoys in stealing artifacts from people who have themselves stolen it from their rightful owners. Mm-hmm. And every now and then she keeps a few because she's got to pay the bills, which is a good line and everything. Yeah, this is like one of the moments where it's like, okay, I appreciate the fact that we're getting to know her. Mm-hmm. And at this moment in time, again, that can change. But there seems to be enough of a character there where it's not just about her being the love interest. Mm-hmm. Again, so far, that could change. But at this moment, I'm digging her. I'm liking her. I'm liking her whole attitude, her whole style.
Yeah.
Some people, I don't think it's the same, like, I won't say she has the same charisma as Marion Ravenwood, but a lot of people have compared her to Marion Ravenwood, who is the one of the classic heroines of the Indiana Jones franchise. Marion was in the first Indiana Jones film, and then the fourth film, who Indy ended up marrying. So it was the first and the fourth one. And Marion Ravenwood, by the way, kind of a similar dynamic that we have here with Layla and with Mark, because Marion and Indiana Jones in the film were working together as like archaeologists, as were Layla and Mark. Mm-hmm. So interesting parallel that they've that we see there. So that was that scene. And then we come back to where we were recapping, and Layla and Mark reconnect, literally, and he's like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" She's like, "Hey," and then they're now working on this together, and so they're on a boat. It seems like to some place where she knows the sarcophagus will be, and their plan is to go in there and find out what they can. And yeah, all that happened. So your thoughts on that, David?
Yeah. So in the beginning of the episode, I realized that too, that you messed up on the beginning, but I was like, I'm sure we'll come back to it at some point. It's fine.
And we did.
Yeah. But actually, I did like that at the beginning of the episode. I really like that we got more information on her. Also, the woman making her passport, that was her mom? I think I might have missed the line.
My impression was that it was her mother, because they were speaking about her father, and that and the lady she was talking about, the father, like something like, "Oh, your father used to," or "I miss him too."
Oh, okay.
And I think it's implied that she is the mom.
Okay. That's cool. But either way, I really like that we got more information about her background and all that. And I mean, it could come up later on. Who knows? I feel like part of it might be important, but also like as they're talking, they're also setting up the fake passport. It was really interesting, like going like, "Oh, this is kind of cool. I like how their process works." And you can tell that Leda has done this before, because she like knows where everything is, how she's setting it up and all that, and basically helping out making the passport. So who knows if she's made a fake passport before for herself, or she's helped her out before. That could be. It's kind of interesting to think.
My impression was this lady has got a whole operation up and running, because she was well supplied. Let me tell you that.
And then I like when she showed up later on with Mark. She just had a drink with her hand and be like, "Hey, what's up?" And then I liked their little boat ride. One, it looked nice. I really like the setting of it. And again, it was just kind of nice getting more background on the both of them. They mentioned their wedding and everything. And so I think they're doing a really good job setting up their relationship, or I guess reconnecting in their relationship, and also just giving us an idea who Mark was in the past. But again, it's just timeline of it kind of confusing, since Steven had no idea who Mark was, and so I don't know. I feel like I feel like at some point, I feel like next episode we really need to know how Mark.
Oh, I think we're gonna find out a lot more about those two next episode. But for this particular exchange, and as far as that's concerned, I'm gonna say, because we still don't know how long Layla and Mark have been married or have known each other. Mm-hmm. Clearly, as is established in this conversation, as we previously suspected, Layla had no knowledge of the existence of Stephen Grant, or the possibility that Mark was going through this particular disorder, that this was even a thing. And so when they talk frankly about, like, Stephen and everything, Mark clearly gets a little bit like sensitive, and clearly is not something that he wishes to discuss, because, and I can only assume, as look, the background of Mark Spector as a former mercenary that killed people probably is not too keen on looking weak or perceived to be in need of help. Just, I know that's overgeneralizing and stereotyping, but I think that more or so fits. And you can see it in his face that it makes him uncomfortable to even talk about Stephen to Layla. That perhaps it's an admission on his part that he needs help and is weak. Well, I'm not saying it makes him weak, but he would consider it to be the fact that it would make him weak, because of this, all this and everything. To which Mark says, and I quote, "I thought I had it under control," which basically is the final, I think, admission on his part with like, yes, it seems as if this is a condition that Mark has been going through basically all of his life or most of his life. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he said he had it under control, I mean, it kind of, it would make sense as to why particularly Layla has no idea. But, I wonder what happened. About what changed. Yeah. Because from Layla's perspective, Mark just disappeared, and then she finds Steven. And it's like, okay, but there's still that missing gap there that we want to see about what actually happens. Mm-hmm. So, of course, still what hasn't been brought up in this episode, who is that third personality in there somewhere? Both of which neither Steven or Mark seem to be aware of. And it would also explain as to why Mark was always aware of Steven, but it doesn't necessarily explain as to why Steven never really was aware of Mark. Like, you'd think that one would be aware of the other.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. Again, I really hope next episode... and chances are I think we are. I'll bring it up when we're done. Mm-hmm. But I really hope next episode they give us a background on that.
Yeah. I think they're going to drop a couple of bombshells, if I'm being honest with you, because, well, go back into what happens. Can you bring us back into the recap as to what happens next?
Yeah, so they end up in a place. Layla knows a guy who, he has the coffin and all that. And it's just...
The sarcophagus, David. Get your damn vocabulary straight.
What did I say?
I'm kidding. You said coffin.
Oh.
It's the same shit. I'm just fucking with you.
I was like, wait, what? Okay, my bad. Yes. No, you're right. Either way. Sarcophagus. Yeah, she says she knows a guy, and so we see him, and there's already just like tension between all of them. Dangerous guy. Very, very bad. But they get to the sarcophagus, and they're trying to they're looking around it, trying to figure out how it could lead them. And then Layla mentions, you got to bring out Steven. He knows more about this than I do. He's just like, fine. So Layla leaves him alone, and he sees his reflection and all that. Steven wants to take over, but Mark is like, no. But then he mentions like, okay, I know what to do. They're working on it, but then the guy who owns the sarcophagus stops him. He's like, what the fuck are you doing? The whole thing is almost about to end up in a fight, but then the villain shows up, and it's like
Arthur.
Yeah. Arthur shows up and he's like,
or Stephen Hawking. I just to pull on the inside joke. Last week's show was kind of a botched escapade, if you will. What you heard is not initially what went down. We had recorded a whole we had recorded a whole podcast that was unsalvageable because my microphone was not used during the recording of it, so we had to re-record it. So what you heard for that review was the re-recorded version, but in the original version, we were both dead ass tired. David was almost basically passing out and on the verge of passing out. And while he was talking about Ethan Hawke's character, I think he thought he said Ethan Hawke. See, I almost did it myself. But he ended up saying Stephen Hawking. And then I had to correct him. And then what happened was well, what did I say? And I told him, I was no, you said Stephen Hawking.
Yeah. So you corrected me, and I closed my eyes. I'm like, God damn it, I'm tired. Okay. Oh my god, it was so funny. That was great.
I know it pains me that moment is lost in history.
I'm glad that it's lost. Oh my god.
Oh my god. So it's Ethan Hawke or Arthur. Arthur walks in.
Arthur, I'll say.
And then stirs the pot even further.
Yeah, Arthur walks in and he tells the owner, "Hey, you can't trust these guys. They're I can't remember exactly, but he convinces him to like not help them. Says like, "Hey, if you let me handle this, and you can have all the little trinkets that you can have. You know, the magic is real on this." And
wait a minute, can I just ask real quick? What was he there to get? Does he get anything?
No, I think
because I saw it twice and I don't remember him walking away with anything. So I'm just questioning what was the point of him walking in there like that.
I think he just hoped to destroy.
Clues. The chance of them. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I think that's enough. It. And I think he also hoped that this guy would handle Layla and Mark. Probably kill them.
Yeah. Kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, and so. And it was almost gonna work. He destroyed the sarcophagus and everything, and then that was when Mark decided, okay, I gotta bring out the soup.
Well, before that though, Arthur drops some interesting information.
Oh yeah,
pretty cryptic information, particularly when it comes to the relationship between Mark and Layla. And you could see Layla is very much spooked when Arthur basically like sees through her and tells her, that she still hasn't gotten over her father's death, and that's why she's, being the way that she is. And then to Mark that he's keeping something pretty big from Layla, and that he's very much afraid of what would happen if she were to find out. And Arthur is a lot of things, but for the most part, he's really good at like bending the truth, and twisting it in a way where it's still true, but it very much is used in a obviously malicious way. Like he's at this point just trying to break them in every way he can. So if the guys fail at like stopping them, perhaps he can succeed in tearing those two apart as a team, as a unit, before they even get to him, because what he basically suggests seems to be pretty dark. Now, I think I have it figured out what it is. Do you think you know what he was referring to?
No.
Because I think, because of course, Arthur had just in that moment brought up Layla's father, and because Layla's father was a topic at the top of this episode, and who is instrumental in who Layla is, and again, if you recall, this, of course, Mark Spector seems, anyway, before he met Layla, to have been kind of a nasty mercenary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm putting it together. Ooh.
You see it?
Yeah.
I think what the implication is that Mark fucking killed her father at that archaeological site, which was basically referenced in the second episode, I believe, when the two cultists are like looking up information about Mark Spector's history and about a nasty execution style mass murder, it seemed like to be at an archaeological site.
Dang. Okay.
I think that's.
I mean, when you mention everything, like, yeah, I feel like that's kind of the obvious answer that's gonna happen. Because I was thinking, I thought the interesting part though is that Arthur didn't mention Mark's sickness or his problem and all that. Because later on, Mark is all he was just making stuff up. He's trying to get in our heads, trying to mess us up and all that. And if he wanted to do that, he would have gone about Mark's situation, his DID thing. But no, instead he actually goes on like Mark himself, his own personality, like in that. What he says, like he thinks he's not worthy of love or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a thing that crossed my mind. It's like, oh wow, he didn't really go after his DID thing. He just went after like Mark himself as a person, like who he is. But then now that you mention it, like, oh dang, I think that's what it is too.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like, this is probably something you're not aware of, but it's exactly the premise for a different romance in a Star Wars novel, Dark Disciple. Now, this Star Wars novel was, I think it was written by Goldie Christie, but she wrote this novel adaptation on scripts that were written for the Star Wars The Clone Wars TV series. 8 scripts, as a matter of fact, by Katie Lucas herself, that were supposed to close out the Asajj Ventress character on the series. Now, these episodes entail how Asajj Ventress and Quinlan Vos, the Jedi Knight, become not just associated with each other, but romantically involved. This whole story of that the Jedi Council were desperate to assassinate Count Dooku, that they sent Quinlan Vos on a mission to befriend Asajj Ventress, the former apprentice of Count Dooku, and form an alliance with her to stage the assassination. What was not expected was that the two would have a fondness for each other. And what is revealed throughout the course of the book is that Asajj Ventress realizes she had murdered Quinlan Vos's former master while she was Count Dooku's apprentice in the Clone War. So,
I'm listening to that book, and I'm in the part where it is mentioned that she might have done.
Oh,
it. Yeah.
You were? I'm sorry. You should have said that before I would have spoiled something.
I already knew. I can't remember if they've already mentioned that she knows that she did this, or if like it's already like heavily implied that she did this.
Okay.
Basically, I knew what you were talking about, so yeah, that's why I'm mentioning it now. So it's like, don't tell me what happens after. Like, does he kill her? Does he whatever?
You should have said something. You should have like stop. I could have said something.
Yeah.
So you're listening to that right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I love that book.
Yeah, it's really good.
Because I love that character.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy we have that, because I mean that is in many ways a story that was supposed to be the final like arc for Ventress in this show, but it also kind of tied it into like the fall of the Jedi Order. And I think you'll see that when the book ends and everything. And it's also something that definitely, it's a story that deserved to like see the light of day as an episode, like a series of episodes. But there is something as a book where it's like, I really love that book, because we're spending so much time with these characters. We're getting like into their inner like thoughts and everything. And yeah, I know we just went off course here, but if you haven't listened or like read Dark Disciple, it is one of the better Star Wars books out there. I think it was one of the first that came out during the Disney era, and so many books have come out since then. But still, I would say pretty underrated if you're a fan of the Clone Wars series. This book is a must. It is a must. Absolutely so. But yeah, that's what, going back to like Layla and Mark, that's what it's kind of reminding me of. And I'm wondering, that's like a powder keg and it's going to blow up. And I'm wondering if it's even going to be able to be fixed and everything. So, that's very interesting. So that happens. And then a fight ensues. And I mean, it's fine.
Yeah. It's an okay fight scene. Moon Knight.
It is disappointing, I will say, though, that we have, look, to an extent, you'd think that Moon Knight would be, I don't know, the action choreography would be at an accelerated level, like above this. So it is disappointing on that aspect to say that it was like a little bit lackluster. Again, not terrible. It just wasn't great. And you think with this show, it would be great because like before the first 2 episodes, it was pretty freaking good.
Mm-hmm.
Not the best, but it was good.
Yeah.
And then here it's like, yeah, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
After that mess is dealt with, Layla basically, as Layla and Mark are driving in the car and are being followed by what appears to be Arthur's people, Layla basically like attempts to confront Mark about like what that was, in terms of what Arthur was talking about. And predictably, of course, like Mark's like not necessarily willing to entertain that conversation because he knows it's not going to lead to a good place, one way or the other. So, and I think we know why that's the case. They stop by, I guess, somewhere in the desert, randomly, I guess.
Yeah.
But they've got pieces of the sarcophagus. Right?
So in the sarcophagus, Mark had to like fold
like a
up
map
these
finder.
These, I don't know, papers, I guess. And it was supposed to create a constellation, and that's going to lead them to the Amut's tomb. They were able to get those from the sarcophagus when it got destroyed, but it was in pieces, and they didn't know how to put them together. That was when Layla mentions, "Hey, you got to bring out Steve. He'll know what to do." And then, so yeah, Mark gets the pieces. He gets a mirror and tells him, "All right, you're up."
Without skipping a beat.
Oh, actually,
Steven comes back.
Actually, we forgot to mention that one part in the fight scene. Steven takes over.
How did I forget?
Steven takes over, and then he goes, "All right, everyone, chill the F out." It's like, can we just all get along here? But then they start shooting him, and he's just like, "All right, Mark, take over. You can take over."
I don't think they shoot him. I think he's impaled.
Oh yeah, impaled, whatever. He gets
isn't like, which is worse, I would say, than being shot at. Like you're impaled, and then like Mark comes back in and everything. That was funny.
Yeah,
I love seeing the different suits and everything, and the different personalities clashing. But in this case, also, it is nice to see Steven being valued.
Yeah.
In this case, and so when he comes back, I love the whole. I love the turn again. The wonderful performer Oscar is, right. Like, he stops being Mark Spector, and then he turns on Stephen Grant with like, "Cheers, mate," and then gets straight to work with putting the pieces together, and in no time they basically have the answer they need. And something that's, I don't know what it is. I honestly don't know what it is, but like whenever like Steven and Layla share a scene together, I don't know, for me the sparks seem to be flying. Again, not much happens, but there's a lot that happens in the way those two look at each other.
Yeah, I think it's just that you like the fact that, at least for me, like I like the fact that Steven has a crush on someone who he has in common with, and
he obviously has a crush. Did you see his face?
Major fucking crush. He wouldn't stop looking at her. And then I don't know. I think, again, for me, it's just I do kind of hope Layla does feel something for him. I don't know if it's going to be love, like what she had with Mark. But I don't know. I think I kind of hope there's something there with them. But either if it's they fall in love or they just become good friends. It's just, I mean, if it works out between Layla and Mark, Steven is just gonna have to be there. So that's something she has to deal with.
Awkward.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. The thing is this, or maybe it will be the best for Layla, the best of both worlds. I don't know. But the thing is, how did you read Layla looking at Steven? Because she also gave him a look.
Yeah.
At the same time. And like at first, I feel like a lot of us are like predisposed to think that she is, looking at him at an inquisitive way, like just like, curious as to how this actually works, the dissociative like disorder, the personalities of it, of course. But again, those two have seemingly a connection with not only the shared interests that brings them together, but like, I don't know, man. She also looked at him in a way where like,
Actually, yeah, it's actually really interesting too, because there's that scene in the boat where her and Mark are talking, and they mention the wedding, and I don't know if it's like the acting or just what it is exactly, but like that spark that you see with her and Steven, I didn't see that with her and Mark when they were in the boat and they were talking about their wedding.
Yeah.
And so
you don't see it because, well, you have to remind yourself, like, they were before Layla comes back and finds Mark, like, they basically were done, right? As an item, because she brought divorce papers with her.
Yeah. But I mean, either way though, like, her and Steven, they've just met and we're seeing the spark. And with them, they're bringing back old memories, and it's kind of like, I mean, I guess maybe because he left, we are seeing it like, oh, this relationship.
Especially since like Layla still knows that like he's keeping shit from her. He consistently keeps shit from her. Like, and that boat scene was before Arthur dropped that other hint. So it's like, I think the line was like, just when I think I figured out who you are, there's still something else that you haven't told me. That, and I think really at the heart of it, that's why they just don't work as a couple. And I guess Mark is very like, he's very closed off. He's very reserved. It's not Steven, who's an open book, who you can tell what he's thinking when you look at him, and who's, I don't know, just kind of charming.
Yeah.
That's not what Mark is. And then with Layla, she's just also like, she's drawn to Steven to an extent, but she's also just confused. There's a lot of emotions flying around
like,
here.
It's kind of crazy to think about, because it's like, how is it working like that? Because that's an important thing with with any like actor. There's when people are making a show, they always do what's it called, like, they find one character, but they need to find the love interest of the character, and they always they pair them up with all these other actors, and they're trying to see who has a better connection, who has a better oh my gosh, what is it called? Chemistry. Yeah, I think that's what it is, a chemistry test, something like that, with the actors. And so it's just kind of weird that like we see chemistry in one, but we don't see it in the other, and it's the same actor.
I know. Yeah. No, I feel you. I think that's exactly how I felt.
Weird.
I know. But why do I already ship Steven and Layla?
I think again, I think we're just happy that like Steven has a crush on someone, and someone to they
I don't know. I'm just happy he's happy to an extent,
I
don't know. I like Steven.
Anyway, the thing, it was in the shape of a star, and it showed constellations. The only problem though is that the map was made 2,000 years ago, and so constellations change.
If only they had a time machine.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, you're in the MCU, right? Take your pick. There've been several that have been invented. You could just go and, I don't know, or you could do something pretty interesting, which is what Khonshu does.
Yeah, this is the part where it kind of like really got me interested in Khonshu. Just like, I don't know, the way that he said like, oh, I remember that night. I remember all the nights. And then he was willing to do something that would have gotten him in major trouble.
He basically sacrifices himself.
And I actually really like
somebody who's been a pretty big asshole to everybody on the show. And you can tell, like, in this sequence where, like, what basically happens is Khonshu figures out a way to get the exact location of the tomb by turning the stars back to how they were that night, which he knows he's messing with the sky is automatically going to get the rest of the gods to imprison him. And you understand that he kind of feels the weight of that moment, and you hear it in the tone of his voice. And you also notice a clear and distinct difference in the way he talks to Steven. Because before, it was very dismissive, very asshole-ish. And then here, like, Khonshu is basically like saying, I can't do it alone. And is dependent on Steven's help. So this is a big moment for Steven as well. But it also kind of like telegraphs to us as the audience, like, Khonshu is... There's a tonal shift here within him, and he understands this is dire. And that just a small thing... it is a big sacrifice, because without Khonshu, Mark and Steven don't got the powered suit.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that kind of leaves them not in a great place. So first,
and
yeah, go ahead.
I like that line though, where when he's about to turn back the clock and all that, and he tells Stephen, it's like, when we're done, tell Mark to find me. As if like, him in prison basically, that makes Mark free, isn't it? Like he doesn't have to worry about this curse or whatever the heck this is. And so I'm kind of curious, like, why does he believe Mark is going to try to find him? Why would Mark want to try to find him? And so again, this is where I mentioned, like, I really, really want background on their whole situation in the next episode. Like, I honestly really want flashbacks happening in the next episode. I really don't mind, like, taking a break from the plot to just get all the info we need on this. And I think it'll work. Like I said, the plot's moving super fast. I feel like, honestly, the next episode could just be them ending it. Because, like, you can have an episode with him trying to find him, and then the next episode can be them stopping Arthur, which would be 5 episodes.
It is interesting, right? Because, like, when we end episode 2, like, Khonshu does not come across all that great. I guess as a presence, as a being. And it's completely turned around here, because really, and perhaps this is why to this extent Mark has remained Khonshu's avatar, is what we ultimately see with Khonshu is not a self-obsessed being. Quite the contrary. Like, he fancies himself as the only god that hasn't forsaken humanity, and he basically falls on the sword for a chance to save humanity. Now, that's not necessarily the kind of being I would have assumed him to be just last episode. And so, there's a lot more to Khonshu. A lot more to Khonshu. A lot more than I like, actually, about Khonshu than I would have previously had guessed it. Because what ended up happening is he turns back the stars, and then he ends up being imprisoned by the gods. It's hilarious how we cut to the gods and they're already, like, casting the ritual. It's like as if they were waiting for it to happen. It's pretty hilarious. But the visual of Khonshu and Steven turning back the stars, I thought was pretty.
I really, really liked it, especially because the way the stars moved, and you get that one shot where the moon is kind of going like in a infinity loop type of thing. Basically like how it should be moving. But I really like the visuals on this, and this also it was really cool that it was Steven that was turning back the clock, because he was making all these comments of like, "Whoa, this is insane! Oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm doing this." I can't remember his exact dialogue, but it was funny that it was Steven that was turning back.
By the way, I love people's reactions. It's kind of been hilarious because people I've been seeing online like, wait a minute. this happened all over the world. People watched the stars turn back and everything, and no one showed up to do anything about it. And I'm like, this is the MCU, for God's sakes. Like, by the way, did you not see in Eternals where the face of God was just plastered all over the sky? Like, and shook, by the way, the entire planet. Like, it seems like as if these people are just like, they just shrug now. Because what Khonshu did, it's an everyday thing, it seems like.
Also, I feel like, honestly, I would have been distracted, like, dang, this looks kind of pretty. But, like, is it the end of the world again? Or, so,
again?
Yeah, I mean, like, I would have been funny if we saw people's reactions. Like, are some of them freaking out? Are some of them just like, do they find it pretty? Or something? But also,
I have to imagine that some people would be pretty fucking annoyed. It's like, can we just, like, I don't know, not do this? Like, what the hell is happening out there? Why are people fucking with our planet so often?
But also, in terms of, like, the other superheroes, I doubt they would, like, know exactly where this is happening or, like, how it's working. So,
yeah. Besides, there's no, like, tangible threat.
Yeah. It's like, the sky's moving. Ow. Ooh.
Okay, it moved, but then what happens? Yeah. Like, what? I mean, I guess somewhere in the MCU there'll be like a team that goes out there and investigates this stuff, but like, there's not much of a story there because there's nothing really to investigate. Yeah, and for the gods, again, I don't even know why the gods would fucking care about like being exposed. Like, the people that live in the MCU. Would they really be surprised at this point, considering what they've seen?
I Thor
again, a celestial just showed up on their doorstep. Everybody on the planet looked up at the sky and saw the face of God, Arisham. Like, Arisham didn't give a shit about exposing himself. He did that. And then he fucking left through a vortex. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That was a whole thing. And then but it ends and they find their location. What's his name? Khonshu is trapped in stone, and then it gets even dumber from the gods' perspective because of all the random things. The gods invite Khonshu's former avatar, Arthur, to come in and say his last words?
Yeah, I don't know why they brought
that was a really weird arrangement that I couldn't wrap my head around. Like, why? What? And then, come on, assholes, Egyptian gods, like, you aren't even the slightest bit curious that perhaps you were duped. They just like leave him. They leave Arthur to like basically confess, and no one's around listening. Idiots, man. Fucking idiots. But yeah, but with what's his name? Ethan Hawke, Stephen Hawking, Arthur. Basically like went there to like thank Khonshu for the fact that if he hadn't broken him so completely, he never would have found Amit to begin with. Okay. Whatever that means. And I think that's basically where we left it. The thing is, this show, especially this episode, is moving at such a nice pace. It almost felt like a short episode. I don't think it was any shorter than the last two, but it just felt like it moved by so quickly.
Yeah, I thought that too. We were just getting a lot of info.
Yeah, and it's moving.
Yeah, and moving.
And I'm liking it so far. I don't have... Besides the stuff that we've already crapped on at the beginning of the recap, structurally speaking and character-wise, I'm in. Yeah. There's something... I mean, I guess the big criticisms have been the choreography, the VFX, and the lack of... not blood, but you know when we say blood. Yeah, it's interesting because like if you could see a Marvel Netflix version of this, yeah, cool. Brutal though, fucking brutal.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I would love that.
And I think really, there's no reason for that for that. There's no reason why you can't do that now that you have the parental controls.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, anything else to say about this week's episode?
No. Like I said, I really like that we're moving fast. I can't wait till next episode.
All right. Well, with that being said, thank you, Dave, for being here. Thank you all for listening to our segment series here, recapping Moonlight. Catch us back next time, and again with all of our other shows that we have already teased out there on Red Spotlight. Yeah, the place for all things, all the stories come out of the world of movies and more. Stay under our spotlight, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.